Hello and welcome to Holistic Keys to Health. My name is Bolanle, your mental health and nutrition advisor. I share insights on mental health, nutrition, and evidence-based psychological interventions that could help improve your holistic well-being. Because we are in April, and April is the Autism month, I have decided that my first set of video series will cover discussions on autism. So I'll be sharing information on autism not only from a professional point of view but also from a personal point of view, because I am an autism mom, I'm an autism advocate, and I've been advocating for autism for at least 7-8 years, and so it's something very dear to me, and I'll be sharing insights from personal experience so that you can understand what autism is. I am focusing mostly on children with autism now, not just generally everyone. So we are looking at how parents can help identify not only parents, teachers, caregivers, school owners, people who associate with children, how they can identify autism in little ones, and then from there they can get the support that these kids need. When we talk about acceptance does not happen without awareness. That is why we need to share awareness as much as possible. When there is awareness, then acceptance becomes easy, and when there's acceptance, integration becomes natural. So let's start with autism. What is autism? I am going to be defining autism, or should I say a general definition of autism is that it's a neurological disorder that affects the development and behaviors of those who have it. So there are three words here that I want you to take note of: neurological, development, and behavior. Those three things are very vital. So let me break it down. Neurological, let's start with breaking neurological into two: neuro and logical. Neuro refers to anything connecting to the nervous system. Under the nervous system, we have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system involves the brain and the spinal cord. And when we talk about the peripheral nervous system, we're talking about the interconnection of the nerves all over our body, connecting the brain, spinal cord, to other parts of the body, and they receive information from the outside, stimuli from the outside to the brain, and then information from the brain to other parts of the body. So it's like back and forth communication. So I like to call the nerves messengers, really messengers for the brain. So these two represent the neuro part of neurological. Now when we talk about logical means reasoning, something rational. When you put the two together, it means the ability of the brain to rationalize things, or the ability of the brain to reason things. So that's neurological. I'm not talking about the disorder now, I'm just letting you understand what neurological means, in a rough explanation. And then when we talk about development, especially in terms of growth, human growth, we're talking about how human beings evolve over the years from birth to death, and how we achieve milestones, how we adapt to society. This is what development really is. And then lastly, behavior. Behavior basically means the outward disposition of our mental processes. So when we are talking about behaviors, it means that what happens inside us is what we display on the outside. As simple as that. So when we're talking about neurological disorder, it means that when there is a slight disorder in how the brain reasons things, that it shows in the development or developmental pattern of that individual, and lastly, shows also in the behavioral patterns of that individual. Now let me use an example. There's in 1999, when I wrote my West African examination, there's this question in biology that says, if you hold on to a hot plate, something about explaining the process in the nervous system, what happens when an individual picks up a hot plate. So the normal reaction, or should I say the typical reaction of the average individual, is that when you pick up a hot plate, the nerve receptors at the tip of your fingers or something, they will pass the information all the way to your brain. The brain processes it as danger and immediately sends a message back telling you to drop the plate. It's not as simple as that. It's a very complex thing. There's a lot of process that goes on in there. However, the logical, the straightforward explanation is that your brain tells you to drop the plate. But in the case of someone who is autistic or someone living with autism, it's not that typical. So yes, they pick the hot plate. This example does not apply to every person living with autism. I'm just using this example. It applies to me because my child had this very exact experience. So for the child that is autistic, he could pick up the hot plate and would hold on to it without pain, without expressing pain, and is in pain. You can see it all over them that they're in pain, but somehow, because the brain is not rationalizing or processing this information in the typical way it does, so it's not telling your body, or it's not telling you to drop the plate, because there's a lot going on in there. It could be a case of sensory overload. It's a case of disorder of the brain understanding the information it's getting. So it's really not the fault of the autistic child. The behavior might seem weird to many people, but to them, that's just the way it is. They don't know any other way to behave, because that's what the brain is telling them to do. And the brain controls our very existence. It controls a lot of things that we do, our movement, our speech, respiration, nutrition, growth, anything, any form of development. Growth and development is being controlled by the brain. So if the brain is not processing things properly, it would affect the development of the person and subsequently the behavior of that individual. As I said earlier, my older son had this very experience, but instead of a hot plate, it was with an iron. Something that really triggered a lot of concern in me. Like, back then I was a young mother, I didn't even understand. Ordinarily, kids don't even need to get to the point where they will be burnt before they scream out. And then this is an 18-month-old child, or perhaps even less. It was already crawling. No, it was probably less than that. It was probably less than a year old. He didn't cry out. He didn't cry for help. Nothing. And till date, the scar is still there to tell the story. So I'm telling you, this happens a lot. So when you see this, don't be alarmed. And back then, I didn't understand why he just had this very huge threshold for pain. So let's move on to other discussions. I hope you understand autism now, a neurological disorder that affects the development and behavior of those who have it. Now, let me move on to something more professional. That's how I like to define it. And basically, most definitions cover it in that regard. However, I want to talk about what the DSM-5, how it explains autism. So this is more from a professional point of view. According to the DSM-5, that is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, Volume 5, autism has three major characteristics. 1, social communication and social integration issues. That is 1. 2, restricted and repetitive behaviors or activities. And 3, sensory integration disorder or sensory issues, basically. These three characteristics really summarize autism, because your child can't have one of these issues and then you say, oh, this child is autistic. However, some kids can have more of sensory issues and less of communication issues, or could have social communication issues, yes, but what I mean is the degree varies. The degree varies. So it's not something you can say, oh, they must all have it in high amounts. Some have all three in really high levels. Some have all three in different levels. And as I always say, as it is said, there are no two persons with the same type of autism. In the far past, autism was described based on certain types. You have them as Asperger's syndrome, you have them as the Rett syndrome, you have the classical Kerner syndrome, and so on. But now autism is now described in levels. This is also something that has been decided in the DSM-5. So autism now exists in levels, and you have them in 3 levels. These levels are determined by the needs and support needed by the autistic person. So level 3 being the highest, that means this person has a very high amount of needs and support. And then you go to level 2. Level 2 has medium amount of needs and support, and then level 1 has the lowest amount of needs and support. However, even within levels, you have sub-levels, because level 1 autism for some people is higher. Maybe the needs are a bit higher than the level 1 autism of some other child. So there's no 2 persons with the same type of autism at all. So even though we have them on 3 levels, we also have them on sub-levels, and the sub-levels also exist in sub-levels. So that's it. Now, one of the things I needed to understand is that autism is not something you can catch like a cold. It's not a disease that you can say you got infected, with. It is a neurotype. It's a neurotype. And so it's something that has been inside you for a long time, from the moment you were born. It's not something that evolved. What happens is that with time, as we grow, it starts to show in the developmental patterns, and then you see it in milestones being affected. Some milestones are not reached at the right time. Some milestones you have to work so hard for them to be reached. And then also based on the kind of behaviors that are displayed by autistic kids, you would start to see later on. So these things are not usually very obvious unless the parents keenly observe their infants. Even professionals find it difficult to diagnose a child that is less than 2 years old, because at 2 we can say you should have achieved a profound amount of milestones. And when you don't achieve those milestones, then those are areas they can focus on and observe to determine what could be wrong with your child. Not every child that has a developmental milestone or behavioral issues have autism. Please take note of this. This is why you need to see an expert to determine if your child has autism or not. Most times the earliest signs coming from 6 months. As I said, my child was less than 2 years old when he did not react to pain. That really should have been a good sign, but of course a new mom would never observe that, would never take that seriously. I just thought, oh, this young man must have superpowers or something like that. It usually starts from there, and then but with keen observation, by the time your child's about a year old, you should be able to start seeing some signs. Most times parents are in denial. Parents are usually in denial. Some parents are in denial for 10 years straight. They would keep saying nothing is wrong. It's just one of those things. I was one of them, by the way. The caregiver in my son's crèche, let me not say her name here. She was the one who identified something was wrong, and I was not happy. I felt, why? This is my really good looking, really handsome boy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with him. It's just a bit delayed, and but with time, I was able to realize, and I think we started our therapy when he was about 3 years old. So you see, I could have started a long time. I should have started like since it was 2, even from 18 months. I should have started something, but we didn't start anything because I was in denial, for that long, till the age of 3+. And I'm really grateful for how far we've gone, and he's really improved over the years. I also want to mention something, because we are Africans, and I know how we are when it comes to black magic or witchcraft. Autism is not witchcraft. Autism is not a gene attack. Autism is not a spiritual attack. Please, we need to understand this. We limit, basically in this part of the world, in Africa, we limit almost everything to spiritual attacks. Don't mind me, don't get me wrong, I'm also into Islamic psychology, so I understand the spiritual aspect, and being a holistic mental health expert, I understand that an individual also exists, with the spiritual angle. However, autism is not a spiritual attack. We need to really get this, because if you deny your child of the necessary attention, occupational therapy, speech therapy, special education, if you deny your child early on, then it will be at your own detriment in the long run. Most times it's because of this belief in afflictions and spiritual afflictions. That is why when a child that is growing so well starts to behave differently or not typically like other kids, you think nothing to do with that. Please be very mindful of that. So there are things that I really have to emphasize in this video. Number one, autism is very unique, and there are no two individuals with the same type of autism. Autism is not bad behavior. Oh, I hear this all the time. Not only kids on the spectrum, but kids with special needs, especially in the school setting. I hear a lot of, this child is just lazy, this child is just badly behaved, the parents are not raising the child well. I know that autistic kids are still kids, so yeah, children will always be children. But when you see this quirkiness, those quirky things that you think are that's strange or not so normal, it's not because the parents are allowing it, it's because they've tried. They realized they're literally helpless. They just can't voice it out because they're in denial of the situation. So they would rather have you tell them that a child is lazy. Some of them are like that, some are more defensive, but in all honesty, it is not because the child is badly behaved. From the examples I've given you, from the explanation I've given earlier on, you should know by now why they behave the way they do. Number 4, autism exists or occurs on a spectrum. You must have heard me saying spectrum earlier on. Yes, it occurs on a spectrum. If you hold on to a ruler, you can see that they all come in different markings, so you have 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, and in between you have the millicentimeters or something like that, and they go on and on like that. That is what it means to be on the spectrum. So you have different levels, they don't occur on the same levels. Number 5, autistic people spend many years of their life trying to adapt to our own way of life. It's not easy for them. It's a lot of struggle, because as I said, it is their neurotype, and you're telling them to change the neurotype to another neurotype or to a different way of life. This is not how their brain works. So it takes a lot of mental effort. It takes a lot of strain, a lot of work over the years, from childhood all through adulthood and beyond, really, because it is difficult to live in a society that does not accept you the way you are. So they have to keep trying to blend in. So it is only fair that the community too comes or meets them halfway. Try to understand and accept. Acceptance is what we are advocating. But without awareness, it is difficult to accept, and that is why it is important, it's imperative that you listen to such videos, watch such video series where you get to learn about it. Make that intentional effort to learn about autism and how people living with autism, the struggle they have to go through to survive. The best way is for you to be aware, seek knowledge, be aware, and then acceptance comes easy. And when there's acceptance, really, integration becomes very, very normal. Finally, autistic people need our love, our empathy, and our compassion. Compassion is what you do. It's not just about being empathic. Compassion is being empathic and working towards making a change. So we need that effort in every one of us, not only for autistic children really, but every special child out there that has needs, that is not growing typically, that is not growing typically, neurologically, physically. Every child with special needs needs that attention from us, needs the love, the empathy, the compassion, the encouragement from us, and that is the way they can thrive. So thank you very much for listening this far. In the next episode, I will be talking about the different signs displayed by children with autism. Stay tuned.